Flawedcast episode 145. Gotta keep them separated. It is the duty of every man, as far as their ability extends, to detect and expose delusion and error. Thomas Paine.
Flawedcast. Get in the arena.
All right, good morning, afternoon, evening, our wonderful, loyal, and exceptional Flawedcast Nation. Thanks for tuning in to another fun-filled, triggering episode of Flawedcast. I want to start by welcoming and thanking my partner in crime, Mr. Carl Tuckerson, for joining me for another week. Hello, Carl.
Good morning, Mr. William. Good to see you. Good to see Ben.
Likewise. Yep, Ben is with us.
At the headquarters. I'm ready to go for another great adventure.
Cool. And we will just get into it. So once again, thanks everybody. Make sure you share us. That's really the only thing that we ask. We're not asking for money. We don't, just share these episodes, please. That is just so important. You can find us anywhere podcasts are. Flawedcast CLE. We're Apple, Google Play, Spotify, Breaker. We are on Rumble under Flawed Inc. You can find our Project Mockingbird social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Getter, Gab, and Parler, all under Flawed Inc. There's a link below in the description. Get a copy of my book, Smith's Heart of Man and Repair Manual. I would appreciate that. And there is our email, which is flawedinccle@gmail.com. Send us any questions, comments, or concerns. Be happy to address those, or you can just hit us up on our social media like so many of you do. But that being said, we're going to move into Carl's second.
All right. Please, everyone, take your right hand, place it over your left heart, and repeat after us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Feels good to say that. And so we're going to be talking about an observation I've had, and I believe this is kind of rolling into this pattern that we've been getting in, and I would say I certainly think this is a prediction for 2023, at least as far as I'm concerned anyway. But I've been observing things, and which I think is probably one of the best ways to obtain any kind of knowledge, any kind of wisdom. I love this saying, learn from your mistakes, that's wisdom, but learning from other people's mistakes is genius. And I just love that, and I think that's so applicable. But I've been noticing things this year, and maybe it's just me, but what I've been noticing is there are divides everywhere. Now, there's been divides for a long, long time, certainly in the political arena, the Republicans and Democrats, if you even believe they're two separate entities, Protestant, Catholic, people who worship the one true God, the Almighty, versus those who don't, so on and so forth. But I'm starting to notice that even within the ranks of these divided, individualized groups, that there are schisms and a coming apart of from these different groups. I have an article I'm going to read, just what I've observed, and I'm going to share something from the scriptures, but I believe as we continue to move forward in this year, in this time frame that we're in, it's going to become very apparent those who understand truth and who He is, and those who either don't, won't, or do but will not admit to it. And I think it's going to become more and more obvious. And I'm going to read the scripture before I do. Carl, any questions?
Yeah, I do.
You had that look on your face.
I do. It just popped in my head sporadically again, but the key word that stuck out was divide. And I heard everything you said, but I heard the word divide louder than the other words. So I have to pay attention to something when that happens. That's how I catch on to an important thing. When we're evaluating, and I want people to know why it is important for you to illustrate to them and give them examples of the divisions that are happening. If you study the art of war, the greatest generals will tell you in strategy, divide and conquer is the number one ultimate achievable goal. So there is strategy in war, not peacetime, but wartime, where the objective is dividing or division. And there's only one reason why there's a strategy set up to divide, and that is to conquer. And as long as we keep that in mind at the very beginning of the journey you're taking us on, that you're going to show us the obvious division, the obvious divide, and we're going to have no problem seeing it as you shed light. But we need to know why. What is the purpose? Because if all we ever learn is what, and we never understand the why, we can never make progress. So divide and conquer, that is the method in warfare to win the war. And I just wanted to bring that out before we even read one more word or say anything.
Yeah, well, a kingdom divided against itself cannot stand. Certainly that's the case. So thank you for bringing that up. That's a good point. All right, here we go. Matthew chapter 13, verses 24 to 30. From the Amplified, it says, Jesus gave them another parable to consider, saying, the kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while his men were sleeping, his enemy came and sowed seeds, resembling wheat, among the wheat, and went away. So when the plants sprouted and formed grain, the weeds appeared also. The servants of the owner came to him and said, Sir, did you not sow good seed in your field? Then how does it have weeds in it? He replied to them, An enemy has done this. The servants asked him, Then do you want us to go and pull them out? But he said, No, because as you pull out the weeds, you may uproot the wheat with them. Let them grow together until the harvest, and at the harvest time I will tell you the reapers, first gather the weeds, tie them together in bundles, and be burned, but gather the wheat into the barn. Okay, so there's a lot going on here. For me, there's a very poignant eschatological meaning and time frame involved in this. And what I mean specifically is, at the end of the parable, Jesus mentions the harvest time. And as we know, even in a natural sense, the harvest time generally comes at the end of a year.
Correct.
And I believe that the harvest cycle he's referring to is the time frame that we are in. I hear a lot of speculation about end times this, end times that, doesn't look like this so far, or this or this. And I just got to say, we're here. I just think that's it. So as we look at this, what we see is that first off, the owner, it said right in the beginning, he sowed good seed. And then people, his workers, saw that both the seed and the wheat were growing up. And they said, didn't you sow good seed? So there's even a bit of a deception within the people that work for him, that they were probably even the ones sowing the seed. They were probably there, putting it out, because I can't imagine like a super rich dude being out there sowing the seeds himself while he has all these helpers. But they were even questioning, knowing the work that he did and they were probably involved in. And then for him to say, no, we're going to let them grow together. And as they grow, they are going to reveal who they really are. That's my estimation and understanding largely of this.
Yeah, this has about three things that you can start with.
Oh, sure.
And
more, probably.
Yeah, that you can take apart. I see it where they did sow good seed. So what needed to be done to have a good harvest was done. There's no issue there, right?
Right.
So that tells me that as a modern day, if I'm going to make this applicable, if I'm going to take this apart like a kindergartner, which is the way that I want to always see Scripture,
right.
I want to understand it like a 5-year-old, because that's the foundation of, education.
We need to speak to you like you're in your car alone wearing a mask.
That is right.
Yes.
I can do everything I am supposed to do to have a proper result. And an improper result can take place. We see this.
Right.
But the funny thing is, when did an evil person come and sow bad seed? While they were sleeping.
Yeah.
To me,
At night.
when I view this scripture and I'm taking it apart, I feel like I'm almost being warned, Carl, you can do what you're supposed to do. But in the process of doing what you're supposed to do and harvesting in your life, do not allow yourself to have any period of time where you don't give attention, where you become unconscious to what you've done, where you don't prune, involve yourself, maintain. They fell asleep.
Right.
And that's when it happened. No one came in while they were awake. No one came in while they were giving attention.
When they weren't being steadfast and vigilant, that's when their enemy, or the enemy as it says,
And
came in. Yeah.
That's exactly right. So that's the first thing. The second thing is they want to know, should we pull out the bad? He says, no, don't. But when you read down to the end, when he's giving instructions, after he says, don't do that, he then tells them, now I want you to do it. At the end of the harvest.
Right.
Gather the weeds. So there was never an issue of whether or not the weeds were going to be pulled. It was a question of timing.
When. Not if, but when.
Timing is.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think those are the key points, is that be diligent and do not quit giving attention, and always wait for the timing of God, because they were going to pull the weeds anyway. If they would have done the logical thing, which is we need to get rid of the weeds because they're going to kill the wheat. It's not that that wouldn't have worked. It wouldn't have worked then. That was the wrong time.
Right. There would have been more collateral damage.
Right. So the key to us is we have to know the timing of God. We have to know the timing to make decisions. We have to know the timing to go in certain directions, because, Mr. William, where I may not go today, I may find myself in a year or 2 or 3, because life, if it is directed by God, is timing. Yeah. And that's where I see here that what was going to happen was going to happen, but just hold on. Just wait a little bit. Just give it some time. Don't rush it. Be patient. Let some things develop. And I think that that is where you're addressing, is what is happening, what is developing, what are we seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. And that, great points, Carl. And just moving into the next portion here, I'm just going to read a brief article. And it's just kind of funny how, like, this time of year, we're all coming, our emotional, mental high from the holidays is all like we're kind of collectively coming down. But during that time, I think, like you just said, we aren't vigilant.
Right.
This is euphoria of, Christmas, Thanksgiving, New Year, blah, blah, blah. And no one's thinking about work. No one's thinking about, real life, if you will. For that month and a half or so, everyone is just outside of themselves. But this is the point of time when a lot of these things, like you said, the enemy came at night, happen.
Yes.
So I'm going to read, and this is from NPR.com, so I guess you could call it a legitimate news source.
I call it toilet paper.
Yeah, well.
Just kidding.
Yeah, I agree. So Kevin McCarthy is elected House Speaker after 15 votes and days of negotiations. Once again, this is from NPR. I'll put a link below. This is from the January 7th. Kevin McCarthy is now officially Speaker of the House. The California Republican eked out a victory after a historic 15 rounds of voting and a drastic series of events in the House floor late Friday night. So I'm not going to really read any more. The whole gist of it is this, is the last couple elections, they have been just absolutely stolen and molested, and we the people have allotted to. But in that, the Republicans have the House, they need to pick a new speaker. So they were voting for Kevin McCarthy. A lot of them were wanting him to be the speaker, and there was a group of Republicans within the Republicans, a large enough group, that said, no, we don't want this dude. Now, if you know anything about Kevin McCarthy, he's kind of like, he's from California. I'm not throwing shade on our people in California, but I mean, it's like a hellhole. It's just the bastion of hopelessness and bondage in America at this point, that in like New York City. But there was a consorted group of Republicans within the Republican that said, we do not want to go with the quote-unquote status quo that we have been the pocket feeling, the backstabbing, the going along to get along, the traditional quote-unquote Republican guard. People wanted, and I believe a large majority of Americans, at least that would classify themselves conservative, actually want their politicians to do what they're supposed to do. They actually want them to represent their views. That's why, just to break down a government real quick, in America, we have a representative governmental system where the people vote a representative to represent their legislative wishes in D.C. So the people that voted, and I got a list of them here, who voted against McCartney 15 times. We have just witnessed American history. That has never happened, ever, in the almost 250 years of American history. There's never been a Speaker of the House vote for 15 times. They couldn't get together with this guy. They just wouldn't listen, buck against the system. And in this process, what I believe, you can look at this analogy, and this isn't like an American gospel, American kingdom of God kind of a thing. This is just what example I felt like God was showing me, that you have these old guards, or who these people maybe who, like a Dan Crenshaw, for example, who people thought, oh, this is a good guy, and so on and so forth. You had these people, maybe a Sean Hannity on the more conservative talk show kind of a thing, but you have these old guards who are just showing their head saying, no, we want status quo, we want the oppressive way that things always been. And there's a group of people that are saying, no, we have been given power, we have the responsibility to make changes where we can, and this is the change that we want. And the thing of it is that looking on the onset, if you're not politically savvy, if you don't understand the different like I said, schisms and isms within this political structure, you might think, well, these guys are crazy. They're all on the quote-unquote same team. It's like, half of the Browns, the Cleveland Browns, warn at the other half of them. It's like, well, that doesn't make sense. They're not going to have any kind of success. But what was happening here, and I believe this is a illustration in the natural on a very elementary setting of what I think we're going to continue to see moving forward. And even when I was talking to Carl this week, even in the church right now, because this is kind of where we always go back, because if we're using this analogy of this parable that Christ was referring to, like, I don't want to be a weed. I don't want to be a tear or a chaff or whatever version you read. I really do want to be wheat. Like, I want to be something that is pleasing and something that is usable for God and His purposes. I don't want to be, and the analogy here is, the wheat were bundled up and thrown into the fire, which is an analogy of hell. I don't want that route. I want the other route. And my wife and I, even the other day, just to kind of more illustrate this point, I talked about I have TV now, and I haven't had TV in years, but we were watching this expose on Hillsong and about the chicanery that was going on in this particular quote-unquote Christian organization. And as I start to look into that, I started to really, because a lot of the stuff is just kind of my gut is telling me, hey, this isn't kosher, or this isn't right, this doesn't line up with the scripture, which to me is the most safe and obvious thing to go with. But when you start to look into a lot of this American gospel culture, what I'm starting to see is not only do the things they do and say not line up with the gospel, but they are taking people on that journey with them. And I believe that is just really destructive. And I think what we're going to start to see now, hopefully through efforts like what we're doing, and hopefully others are going to come alongside and join us, that we're going to see this shaft or tear or weeds being separated from the wheat. And the difficult thing is they grow up together, they look alike. And I think part of the reason, and I'm no farmer,
Well, all you need are a pair of overhauls, and you'd look like one to me. But.
Yeah, well, I got boots now for my muddy backyard. But my point being is, there's an assumption on my part that I understand that when wheat and weeds are initially growing, they look identical. My thought would be, unless you are a trained specialist, part of the other reason with not wanting to remove the weeds prematurely before the timing, once again, is the collateral damage. It's like saying, no, this was supposed to be a wheat. This was supposed to be something fruitful and usable, but now it was prematurely taken out.
I agree, and I think that this goes back to the importance of patience and the importance of not only patience, but the willingness when the time is right to do something. Like, sometimes I think people with desires for idleness are lazy or scared, and they confuse patience with fear, with being timid, maybe confused sincerely, because if you go back up to Matthew 24, where this parable is told, I almost sensed confusion in the question. Like, I know they had been deceived, but I think that they were so deceived that they started questioning what they did, what they saw. Like, there was this question of, wait a minute, Master, didn't you plant good seed? Like, I know I helped you. I know I handed it to you. I watched you throw it. I watched it hit the ground. I know at the time I was told it was good seed and you thought it was, but it almost seemed like they sincerely were confused about what they saw. And I really feel like right now it is a confusing time. I mean, we're on guard, and I have to really pay attention, and I have to take my time, and I have to read, and I have to pray, and it's like, and I know to be on guard. But the one thing that you had just said that really stuck out was that in the beginning, there is a time period where the weeds and the wheat are growing together, where they look identical. But my grandma used to say when I was a kid, because she died early and I was not that old, I was the oldest grandchild, but I didn't get to grow old with her or older. If you give the devil enough rope, he will always hang himself. And that goes back to time. And although you and I are not gardeners, we are not farmers, we're probably easy to trick on vegetation and whatever. But even I, Mr. William, have the ability at a certain period of time, when given enough time, for a weed to grow next to wheat. I can tell the difference. In the beginning, I cannot. I can be deceived. I can be confused. I can be tricked. I can even question myself. But that issue, again, of it isn't the time. It isn't the time. Just wait. Now, I am easily seeing what I couldn't see a few years ago. And I think that's where you're taking this.
Thank you, 100%. And as we begin to clearly see the delineation or the line being drawn between, using that the imagery of the parable there, the wheat and the weeds, who for a great portion of their life growing were identical, like you're saying, at least to the novice's eyes.
Right.
We are now seeing very, very, very closely, very clearly that, and I believe as we move forward, we're going to continue to see what is good, what is usable, what are those whose purpose and their path is noble and righteous versus those whose aren't, and in that, who are causing confusion and purposeful deception to mislead and to trick people who aren't able to be as discerning, or who aren't, maybe who are younger pieces of wheat themselves. But the more I start to dive into the origins of things, because that's kind of been, I've been on this, my wife got me the book of Enoch and the Apocrypha, and I've been really reading and taking this stuff in.
So you're really going back to the beginning instead of accepting that the beginning wasn't really the beginning, is what you're, true origin, the true beginning, the true birth.
Right,
Okay.
exactly.
Thank
well, and see, all this stuff is shrouded in mystery and confusion.
Yes.
And God is not the author of confusion. He isn't. And things I've been seeing a lot lately are imagery, the acknowledgement of an Illuminati, acknowledgement of the, and a lot of this is Freemason imagery. You start looking and you see and a lot of this starts with people who have sway in our culture.
Yeah, oh yeah.
They emphasize their eye, which is the one eye, which is ultimately goes back to the eye of Ra, which is a false god, which is it's also used as an illusion of Big Brother. It's also used as the great architect in regards to Freemasonry. But a lot of this stuff you're starting to see, and a lot of cultic or occultic practices are now becoming mainstream. They're trying to become mainstream. These things are trying to become normalized, and I'm starting to even see this in regards to quote unquote Christian celebrity. The culture of Christianity in America is now becoming polluted with these things. I'm just to simply break it down. All the Illuminati is, but my understanding is, and you can even, once again, I'm starting to go back, the Apocrypha, the book of Enoch, trying to learn this information, is that there was people who had information. Most of it was handed down, according to the book of Enoch, from the fallen angels.
Correct.
Who, and you can read about this in Genesis 6, but in the book of Enoch, it explains it way more. They brought this forbidden information from heaven that wasn't, and a lot of it started with the knowledge of good and evil when Adam and Eve bit the apple, or the plum, some say, and that's when that knowledge of good and evil, this began to enter into the world on a pragmatic level, and it continued through the Rahim, the Nephilim, the fallen angels, the Watchers, so on and so forth. Yeah. But there has been these
the
Anunnaki, thank you, and there's been this guild, or this group of people from that time down to where we're at, who have had this hidden knowledge. They feel this compulsion, this evil compulsion, that they are the watchers and the keeper of this knowledge, because they are the illuminated ones.
I believe at that time period, I really believe, if you want to talk origin, you're talking my language now, because you and I know, and I brought this to the podcast. I have a code that I make decisions by, and it's called LCD.
Lowest common denominator.
You can't get any simpler
right.
than the lowest place to take something because that's always the beginning. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm all about origin, and I am certain after studying, and I'm glad you're going down this path because you and I will have something even more to talk about, and I'm excited.
Good.
But that is the beginning or the birthplace or the origin of information is power. I believe that it went right to that time period, right to those events where the supernatural beings interacted with humanity and gave them technology and gave them information and gave them the wherewithal and gave them the ability to do things that humanity couldn't do. The information and technology was so far advanced for its time period, even today, and I believe that the holders of that information from the beginning of time have handed it down, and the people that continue to have that information have so much power with that information that they continue to manipulate the world. The world
100%.
spins in the direction of the orders of those giving directives.
Yeah.
And it's all self-serving. It's for what they can gather, they can achieve to several things. But one, and don't forget, they have to maintain power, Mr. William.
Well,
they have to maintain it.
And
So-
that's it. That's 100% it. And I, back up until the early 1900s, these books were included in the scriptures. The Apocrypha was, the Book of Enoch. But at some point, 100-ish years ago,
I wonder under whose directive these books were instructed to not be ordained or to not be added.
Right.
Again,
Right.
if you shed light on darkness, darkness disappears.
Well, and that's 100% it, because this changes the complete course of human history. It does, and
Yeah,
we're
it
kind of
does.
going off on a rabbit trail, and maybe we can dedicate a whole episode to this.
yeah, I'd love to.
But my whole point of bringing that in is that we are now starting to see that that is even false knowledge, that people think that there is this, whatever going on. But the reality of it is that it's just very simple. The truth has been hidden. That people have not been told the whole truth, which is also a lie, and we're at this point now where these people, even occult just simply means hidden. Mm-hmm. You think of these. I always think of the movie The Burbs with Tom Hanks, and
Yeah. That's funny.
His neighbors are, cult members, and they have the scene in his dream where they're wearing the black robes and all this, and where is there that's true, that those are actually, they're mocking, if you will, those kind of practices. People think generally that this is what's going on, and it is. Like a great example is the movie Eyes Wide Shut, with that Stanley Kubrick directed, his last movie.
There are a lot of backstories about that. That whole process and his death and the editing of 15 minutes of the movie that he fought over.
Yeah.
And he wasn't going to let it be unedited. And then he died before certain times could be, I don't want to get it. This could go so deep. I don't want to do that. So let's bring it back.
Yeah. Let's dedicate an episode in the future to this. But my larger point being is that we're now being even misled, thinking that the holders of this knowledge, and all they're doing is just using those people who won't believe or won't investigate and gain the knowledge. Once again, the scriptures say, without knowledge my people perish, to find out where we're at. And I believe as we continue to move through this time, God's going to continue to reveal himself more and more to those who are asking him to reveal themselves to. And there is a process you go through for that. And I want to encourage our listeners, and I'm sure most of them are, I know most of them are, they are on that path to acquire intimacy and knowledge of God, while the rest of everyone else is going to continue to, like the weeds, be problematic, to be divisive, to cause confusion, deception. But we, based on this parable, understand their ultimate end. But as we are going through this time until that final harvest that Christ refers to, we are going to I don't even want to say the word compete, but we are going to have to deal and contend with these people, with their deeds, and with their knowledge or hidden knowledge or whatever you want to say that they use to manipulate people with. So you look like you had one.
No, I think that's a great point. I think that you gave us a great warning of the time period, what's coming ahead. Be on guard. But I just think that bringing this out, shedding light on it, using just one example when there are so many, but this is fresh, of the division. Divide and conquer is the objective. Let's not forget that. It also indicates that we are at war. We're just at spiritual war, spiritual warfare. We're not to fall asleep. We're to always pay attention, always be on guard. Don't turn your back. Although you did do what you were supposed to do, you did the good. Maintain, be on guard, stay alert, and understand that there's more division coming. But that's not a bad thing. We now know.
Exactly.
Like that, we can recognize now, right? Whereas before, we said it's easy to be deceived and confused, but not so easy anymore. You almost have to want to be deceived.
Yeah. It takes a lot of willful ignorance, I believe. But we have a large portion of our culture and society that's doing that. So I think this is a good place to let Ben give Carl a hug, and we'll put this episode to bed. We appreciate you guys listening. Please share. Once again, we're just asking that you share. If you have questions or concerns, and I'm hopeful soon here, maybe Carl and I can go down this Enoch rabbit trail again, and kind of bring this out, because there is a traceable history with this idea of hidden knowledge. But we'll say that for another episode soon. But please share. I think people need to hear this. I think this is important stuff that, once again, the quote-unquote spiritual leadership in America is not telling people. And it is in service. It's a misservice to not share things with people, and they can make their own decisions. Like, I believe I just received a miracle from God involving my health, but I had to go through a process that I had to listen to the doctors and hear what they say and get their information and process it. So just share. That's all we're asking. You can find us anywhere podcasts are. Flawedcast CLE. We're on Apple, Google Play, Spotify, Breaker, Anchor.fm. We are on Rumble under Flawed Inc. You can find us on the Project Mockingbird social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We're also on Gab, Parler, and Getter, all under Flawed Inc. There is a link below to get my book, Smith's Heart of Man Repair Manual. I would appreciate that. Also, our email is flawedinc@gmail.com. And you have any questions, comments, or concerns, send us an email, or you can hit us up on our social media. But that being said, we will see you next week.